Greetings, conservatives. This is your humble host, John Moraga, and we are back with more ConservaCast. We look forward to keeping you informed with the latest and most relevant commentary of conservative issues. So without further ado, here are a few topics I'd like to discuss.
Yes, it has been some time since the last ConservaCast, and I'll be talking about that today, as well as what's on everybody's mind, the coronavirus. And lastly, I'll be talking about my beard. That's right, my beard. But to begin, I want to explain what's been going on and why there's been a little bit of a hiatus. I had every intention of making a more frequent ConservaCast. And at Conservatives Corner, we have been doing a number of things. More recently, because of what's gone on with the coronavirus, I've had to take a little bit of a hiatus. But even before that, I personally have been establishing and launching a ministry. And there is a link below in this video for anybody who's interested. And I've been investing some time into that. Not because I didn't want to tend to Conservatives Corner, by no means. There are a number of people who had been asking and wanting things to continue, and we do want to provide more for you. But I felt a calling to really kind of focus on something that had been in the works for a little while. But I thought, you know what? This is the time. And so for the past several months, I've been kind of putting things together. And as I said, there's a link below, but the ministry is called GnosLogos. GnosLogos. Gnos, as in the Gnostic or Gnosis, and Logos, as in logos are the word. And I won't get too far into it, but I just kind of wanted to explain because some of you may have been curious. Well, what's happened since the last video that you put out, or that Conservatives Corner has tried to get out there and be engaged in the conversation. So, mainly, the reason for that has really kind of come full circle to what's happened with the coronavirus. But because of my personal background and history and testimony, there was a need, I believe, to have put that in motion. I did a few videos. One was about my testimony and going more into it and some of the things that I had done previously and before coming to know the Lord and giving my life over to Him. And I don't want to make this video completely about a theological topic or just trying to proselytize. And so that's why I said there is a link below if you want to check that out, gnoslogos.org, gnoslogos.org. And I've already produced a number of videos up there for that. And so I encourage anybody who may have some despair right now. It's a unique ministry, and if you check it out, you'll see what I'm saying. But I cover a wide range of ideas and unique perspectives on the scriptures and God and our society around us, and what I've kind of gone through prior to me going into the Air Force at a young age, coming out of the Air Force, going to college, getting my degree, and getting into some very, how shall we say, unsavory things in the world. And I know most people have a background or a testimony that they could give if they've come to know the Lord and have a history that they aren't very proud of. But I think most people would find what I've put out there edifying and something that can give them pause to think, even if they can't directly relate. It's very interesting to delve into some of the topics that I've tried to get into. And if you can relate to it, all the more reason to have some way to feel that there is somebody else who has attempted certain things or delved into certain things that aren't very godly, to say the least. And I'm still actually, over the course of the past few years and over the course of the next few years, I will probably be taking the time to finish a book that I started um, that goes even more into detail about things. And it's not just a biography, as much as it is a lot of commentary, not just about me and my life, but about the world around us. And that's partly why I founded Conservatives Corner, and people have joined in, and there's a team to really get this off the ground and to stay engaged about um, topics, politically conservative topics in our political realm. But inevitably, because of the nature of conservatism and the history of uh, more right leaning politics, the intersection of social, worldly issues intertwine with religious issues. And God we trust, one nation under God. And I don't have to explain this to a number of conservatives, to the conservatives watching this. It's pretty fundamental. And so it's very natural to have that kind of crossover, but I didn't want to bring in a very heavy religious or proselytizing sentiment in the conservatives' corner videos or articles or website or social media or outreach out there. Um, there are some hints to it, inevitably, as I said, but I really wanted to spend the time and focus on a separate endeavor of well, of an actual ministry. And I'm extremely involved in my home congregation, uh, doing it's not really the same type of ministry per se, but I'm heavily involved in doing a lot of things in the inner workings of my own congregation and giving the time and serving and helping and doing things prior to me starting GnosLogos. But I wanted to delve even deeper into some personal experiences and some unique perspectives. And for those of you who do know my biography, just very briefly, again, not to get too religious, but um, I did graduate from the University of Judaism. That's right, the University of Judaism. Now it's actually been renamed because it merged with another university. It's now the American Jewish University. It's out in Los Angeles, specifically Bel Air. If you're familiar with that neighborhood, there was a show back in the day, The Fresh Prince of Bel Air. I did not live in a home like he did on the show, but it was still that neighborhood. There was still kind of that culture and that setting out there. But anyway, the point is that in and of itself gave me a pretty unique perspective on biblical and religious ideas. Um, Even though I graduated from there, it was not a Christian university by any means, but because of my later endeavors in in studies, it provided that background. So that's just by way of one example, just one of many. So I encourage anybody who is interested to at least check it out. And if you can't directly relate to some of the things that I'm talking about, I think I'm pretty positive and pretty confident you'd at least find them interesting and possibly even glean some new ideas from them. So again, that's gnoslogos.org, gnoslogos.org. Again, the link is below. But I want to move on to the topic at hand on everybody's mind: the coronavirus, COVID-19, as it's labeled, or however people have identified it and classified it. I want to be very careful in how I address this because I may be accused of being very insensitive or very dismissive or very conspiratorial or very Trump loving or just getting on the bandwagon of certain things. But by no means, if you've watched Conservatives Corners videos before, or read our articles, or um, been familiar with our stance on things, we are very genuinely conservative, and we don't just jump on the bandwagon of supporting Trump or uh, being one-sided with everything. We have plenty of criticisms for Trump, um, plenty of criticisms for the Republican Party. But I think there are some times where we may agree or we may have very similar ideas or views. And when that happens, we get accused of being biased to just support Trump. That being said, I do want to, um, again, it's very difficult. I don't want to step on anybody's toes. Well, I really quickly just want to give one uh, example or one setting of how saying something wrong can lead to bad consequences. So there was a commentator on Fox News, I believe her name was Trish Reagan. She made some comments that this whole coronavirus was some type of planned storyline to prevent Trump from getting reelected because it would drive down the economy. It would make him look responsible for this in some way, shape, or form. It was pretty hyperbolic. It was pretty extreme, relatively extreme. It could have even been even more. But the point is, she has now apparently been shown the door and no longer is at Fox. She was, I think, a commentator on Fox Business, but Fox as a network has let her go because the understanding was that apparently Fox is typically a an outlet or network, media network that provides information to an elderly demographic. Not exclusively, not only an elderly demographic, but a good percentage of the audience of Fox News is an older population. And so the concern was that by providing even what was perceived as disinformation or not taking the coronavirus seriously enough, she was doing more harm to society than just being a commentator and giving her opinion about things. So it was pretty serious. Now, we could talk all day about free speech, about the free market, about what Fox is able to do, what should they be able to do, etc. But the point is, she's just one example of how somebody can get into hot water for not taking this very seriously or presenting a message that is more dismissive of it than it really is. So, with that background, as I said, I don't want to give the perception that I am not taking this seriously, but at the same time, I would like to put some perspective on it, or at least give my input without being chastised so much. That being said, I believe that the coronavirus is real. I do believe that it is concerning that it is so contagious. It has a very high rate of being passed on to somebody else or multiple people. And so those things I will not be dismissive about. And I'm really not being dismissive of much else. I'm just trying to put into context what it is that we're facing. And there have been many reports out there. I'm not the first to divulge this or to focus on this, but there are far more fatalities or causes of death than the coronavirus. In fact, the normal flu may cause more deaths, um, and unfortunately, even abortion far surpasses the coronavirus as cause of death. Now, if you're a conservative watching this is not surprising, and you understand the severity of that cause of death. if you're a liberal or moderate or somebody who is anti-conservative or whatever group, and you're not really uh, sensitive to our values, then you'll dismiss this as, oh, that's just propaganda. That's just more, right wing, right to life type of propaganda. But it is a fact. If you understand or you believe that abortion is essentially murder and taking of a life, a human act, an actual human life, and not just a ball of cells, then you have to understand how much it dwarfs the number of fatalities of the coronavirus. Now, I'm not going to focus on abortion and making that comparison. My point is just that car crashes, um, other types of ailments are far more deadly than the coronavirus. I believe at the filming of this video, there are hundreds of deaths that have been caused by the coronavirus. Now, the concern is, to be objective, the concern is that in the near future, in the next few weeks or months or several months, it may rise to a few thousand or possibly more. Worst case scenario, it could jump up into maybe the tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. That's at least understanding where there may be concern. If it jumps to hundreds of thousands or even peaks at a million, more than that, I could see where there would be a concern and why people are trying to take more precaution now than have it reach that point. But at the same time, there doesn't seem to be that big of a spread or inability to contain the symptoms that we do with any other type of virus. And we can't prevent every death from happening. Now, just as far as context, over 100 years ago, or just over, or about 100 years ago, there was the Spanish flu. If you're not familiar with that, please look it up, do some research on that. The Spanish flu killed, estimated between, and I don't know where they get these estimations, but at least 50 million people. Some estimations have it at 100 million people. That is a lot of people, especially at a time 100 years ago when the world population was just over a billion, maybe a billion and a half. So you do the percentages there, you're looking at close to 5-10% of the entire world, if my math is correct. And now we have 7+ billion people. I think maybe 7.5 ish. I don't know the exact number, but it's far more than what we had 100 years ago. And if we're looking at a few hundred deaths, at least in the United States, let me clarify. There are now at least a few thousand across the world, but even that hasn't hit, I don't believe, 100,000, much less a million, much less 50 million or 100 million. So, although no death is insignificant and no life should be overlooked by any means, i.e., right to life, but I won't go there, we should at least have some perspective on it. And does it merit the level of caution and halting of our economy as we are doing right now? Does it necessitate that we come to a halt and basically have another recession and or depression, depending on how long this goes, economically? Now, that's just economically. We need to consider that, well, first of all, let me back up just one moment. The reason that the Spanish flu killed as many people is that they didn't have nearly the level of medical advancements as we do. They didn't have nearly the level of medical education that we do right now. So, although there is a lot of griping about getting equipment out, whether it's ventilators or masks or other things, you're talking a world of difference between 100 years ago, where I think they were still bloodletting in some places as a medical way where they thought, letting out some blood might have some cure, or sanitation procedures, or there are a number of things, a whole lot of things that we have done and learned since then to advance our medical care. Now, I don't, again, want to dismiss the severity of what it can potentially do or how fast it can potentially spread. But I think the key thing that still needs to be discussed, and I think if you bring this up, you get drowned out by either the media or people around you who may be really scared or frightened about this. I think the conversation really does need to take place about, are we really doing what we should be doing to contain uh, this and still function? Now, not just with the economy, how about psychologically? How about the cabin fever that starts to set in? Now, I'm in California. Conservatives Corner is based out of California, and it is the maybe second, third, or I think in the top 5 states to be hit. And because we have about 12% of the entire country's population, with nearing, I think, 40 million people, um, to have a government imposed shelter in place lockdown starts to affect the psychology of Californians and people in New York, people in other states where their governor has mandated a shelter in place shutdown. It has allowed me and others with Conservatives Corner to make some more material and force us to be creative in how we do that. But my children want to get out. They want to go back to school. They want to see their friends. They want to have these times out. Adults, I read an article, and forgive me for not bringing it up or citing it, but it was an article that had stated that there is a increase in domestic violence. It's unfortunate. I mean, I have a loving relationship with my wife, and there's no really no jeopardy of that happening. But in other households, if there is already a situation where people can be tense with each other, there may be substance abuse, there may be infidelity, there may be a number of reasons for there to be already a lot of contention in a home. When you force that situation to take place, it becomes exacerbated. It becomes heightened even more. And not just that, bad scenario, or even, fortunately, abusive homes, parents to children. It If there's no outlet, there's no escape, it only perpetuates it even more. But even not so drastic of a case, normative healthy adults at some point will start to have a deterioration and deterioration, I think I said that right, in their minds, in their psychology. Because we are social creatures. That's the way we were designed. We were raised. I mean, that's, for those of you who read the Bible, that was one of the first things that happened in creation. God saw that Adam was lonely. He needed a mate. He needed interaction. And of course, it's just two people, but eventually they had children. They wanted to have a family. There were societies that developed. I mean, we are by design not meant to be hermits or shelter in place, especially for a long period of time. So as we come up on week 3 or 4, however long it is coming up on, by the time you see this video, we are starting to see some of the cracks. And so not just economically, but psychologically, but also spiritually. I know it's been very difficult for me and others to not go to our congregation. We can't even meet for services, and this is going around. This is going around the country. This is going on. If you can't go to praise God or have fellowship with other believers, it's daunting. this was the second week that we weren't able to physically meet in person. And one of the things that a number of places are doing is Zoom, a social virtual meetup group. But that has a lot of benefits, but also some downsides. It was bittersweet to have that experience and that interaction because although it was great to see some people's faces and have some interaction with people that we hadn't seen for a couple weeks, it was also a very stark reminder that we're not able to physically meet in person, and it's sad. Those are my brothers and sisters spiritually. Those are the people who encourage me and I encourage them, and we have worship time together. We sing songs and listen to sermons and have a time of prayer and just listening to each other. What's going on in your life? What is it that I can do for you, or how can I pray for you, or what is it that we can do as a family, a spiritual family? If there's somebody new that comes in, to introduce them to the scriptures, to a welcoming family of God fearing people, to introduce them to the Lord, to give them that hope that otherwise they're not able to receive. So there are a number of things that are starting to deteriorate because of this government imposed shelter in place lockdown. And so it really is coming to a point that we have to measure the cost benefit analysis, the risk benefit analysis. What is it that can actually happen? And what is it that is actually happening? See, we need to weigh the potential harm against the actual harm. And to, again, President Trump's credit, he's talked about that. And he's kind of had to be pulled in again from his advisors to say, no, this is still seriously a situation that needs to get more um, restraint. You need to still keep people in place. We still need to take these measures. But even he recognizes, and rightfully so, that at some point we need to start normalizing our society. We need to get back to the things that we used to do. And if there is a potential for there to be more harm, more sickness, more death, it may be a point to where that might be the better alternative for some deaths or some illnesses than many illnesses or bad situations. As I said, without some extremes, abusive spouses or abusive parents, or substance abuses that take place, or the lack of a job, the lack of social interaction with your congregation. I mean, there is a whole list of things that we are actually experiencing as opposed to potentially experiencing. And here's the other thing, without being too proselytizing. Again, GnosLogos.org. You can check it out there. But in the worst case scenario, I die. Excuse me. Now, I am a husband and a father of several children. And I do not want to die. I do not want to leave them behind. I do not want to be separated from them. I still have a lot to do for my wife and my children, that it would not be a good scenario if I was to pass away. But ultimately, I could die in a car accident. And I almost did. That's the other thing. For those of you who have had near death experiences, you'll understand. This isn't my first trip to the rodeo. This isn't the first time that I've had to face the potential what if scenario. And because of that, that's all the more reason that we have a an assurance through Christ. In the scriptures, for me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Ultimately, I will ascend to a much better place. And ultimately, I have the faith that should I leave, that my wife and children would be taken care of somehow, some way, and that the Lord would provide. That's a strong faith to have. And it's a faith that I don't think a lot of people do have, and that's unfortunate. But if we had that faith, if more people had that faith, there wouldn't be a sense of fear and hesitation to continue life as normally as possible, even at the risk of contracting what may come. And even if it was contracted, there still is a pretty low mortality rate. There still is a pretty low level or odds that you would actually die from this. So, understanding that, I want to wrap this topic up because I may talk about it again depending on how long it lasts. In fact, actually, in the next video, I will be talking a little bit more about that, about this in a different way. But I wanted to give my take and my perspective and my view of this and encourage you guys to not live in fear. If you don't know Christ, by all means, check out GnosLogos.org, send me a message. I think, especially in these times, there was even a meme that I had seen, and I don't know how. eh, I I have good reason to believe it was real, but there's a slight possibility because you don't know everything on the internet, but it was from a valid source. There was a meme where there was a picture of the bookshelves at a store where they sold Bibles, and all of the Bibles were sold out because it's indicative of people trying to find answers and who aren't normally religious may be seeking answers because of this and trying to understand how weird of a world we're living in right now. And so I encourage you, if you have questions, if you've considered coming to faith and having a moment of an encounter with Christ and truly repenting and having that assurance and that confidence of knowing that whatever happens, if you rely on Him, if you put your faith in Him to give you salvation, but important and key to that, salvation from yourself, your sins, your self love, and not love of Him. By all means, please send a message or again, reach out to gnoslogos.org. And we will be quick to follow up with you. That being said, I did want to talk about my beard. My beard. The reason I say my beard that way is that I do want to try and get a little bit more comical with things. I want to kind of provide you a little bit more relief from all this, and so that is something to focus on here. Got some whiskers, and I don't know how well it's actually growing in. My wife is starting to hate it. My children are starting to get scratched by it when I pick them up and hug them. Now, I've heard a number of different opinions on what I should be doing or how to do this. Now, the reason why it looks like this and it's a bit scraggly is that I don't know how it comes well or how much it is on camera, but I don't grow a full beard. I have patches. I have patches. But what I did find out, and again, this is the age of the internet. What I did find out is that you need to let it just grow. One of the big key things that I was advised, or the opinions that I found out, just let it grow. Just let it keep growing. Don't cut it. Just let it grow. Because with rare exception, even if you have a patchy beard, eventually it'll all set in. Because the idea is, or the hypothesis is that the patches actually do have hair that will start to grow, but they grow at different rates. And so, over the course of time, the areas that are no longer, or the areas that look bare or don't have hair, will either start to grow the hair, or in this case, you see how a mustache might come over on this side, or whatever the case is. But the other old opinion or advice is that you keep cutting it and it'll grow out faster or thicker. It's almost the opposite of that, is that you keep cutting as well. I erred on the side of just letting it grow because you can always cut it. You can't make it grow any faster than it is. But it is a little scraggly. It's not so bad. About maybe a month ago, it was even scragglier because you had a little pointy thing. And I don't know if you can notice somewhere in here, I have a white hair. I have a white hair in my beard. I'm sorry. I just, you know, it's one of those things where you kind of hit a wall. Now, actually, before that, and you might be able to see it here, I started to go bald, and now I've got a white hair in my beard. I never believed in midlife crises or knew really what they were. And I'm not saying I'm there yet, but it's getting a little difficult to face the reality of my age. I've got balding scalp, a white hair in my beard. I'd say within about 5 years, if that, I'm going to have quite a little bit bigger of a forehead and a lot more salt coming in here. So uh, you could call it distinguished. You could call it wise. You could call it old. Whatever the case, whatever you want to call it. I hope you can at least grow old with me. I hope that you'll be able to see the progression over the course of the next few years because I am not going anywhere. We are not going anywhere here at Conservatives Corner. I am not a comedian by trade, although I have had some people say that I'm a little bit humorous, but that is what many people say. Uh, Many people have been told, "You're funny," and they go try and have a career in comedy, stand-up comedy, writing and shows and stuff. And the moment they get up there, they flop, they fall down, and they're not really that funny. They may be funny to the people around them or have some type of inside joke humor, but they're not actually objectively funny. Well, I put that caveat out there because my attempt to be funny is to try and bring some upbeat happiness to a lot of what's going on right now with this coronavirus thing and people being at home and having a need to have an outlet somehow, to have the ability to laugh at ourselves, to laugh at the situation, to laugh at things, to bring some joy, to bring some happiness. And if it's a matter of laughing at me going bald and having a white hair in my beard that may be more than one white hair over the course of the next few months or years, so be it. Um, but hopefully, the next few ConservaCasts might be even more entertaining and humorous. I will be talking about food. And to end this, I had been promising for some time to provide recipes and asked you guys to send in some recipes. And we're going to be doing that a lot more. In fact, in the next ConservaCast, you won't want to miss it. I do have a recipe, which will lead into other recipes as we go along. But I'm keeping to my promise, even though I've been away for a while and you haven't been able to keep in touch. I am keeping to my promise to provide those recipes. So stay tuned in the next ConservaCast and a way to potentially make some money, that you can make some money. This isn't a scheme. This is just sensible advice or opinion. So take it seriously. You'll have some food to eat or prepare for yourself in a way that you might actually be able to pay for it. So I hope all is well. I hope you stay safe. I hope you stay healthy. And if you actually are watching this and you actually do have severe symptoms of COVID-19, please be assured, I am not dismissing it. You are in my prayers, and I hope that you have good health and that you have a relationship with God that you can rely on Him. So please be well, please be upbeat, and please stay tuned for the next ConservaCast. God bless.
Thanks for joining us once again, and we hope you'll invite your friends and family to join us in our efforts to champion conservatism for generations to come.